Hey, how's it going? Welcome to the free filmmaking training. I appreciate you taking the time to tune in, and I highly value your time, so I'm going to be giving you as much pure value information in the next hour as possible. Now, my goal in this training is to help you improve your video skills by teaching you my top 10 secrets to creating cinematic videos. And whether you're a complete beginner, an intermediate, or even a pro, there's tips you can take from this training that will help you elevate your video skills so that you can create videos that stand out from the crowd, helping you land higher paying clients or improve the marketing and advertising efforts in your own business. Also, make sure to watch till the end, because after the 10 secrets, I'll be also sharing my 6 steps that I took to go from a complete beginner, not knowing where to start, to now making over 6 figures a year shooting videos. Now, it did take several years to work up to a 6-figure income, but with my online school Full-Time Filmmaker, I've been able to help many of my 7,000 students get there in much less time. So if you enjoy this free training and want to join the full course, I'll be providing an exclusive discount at the end for those of you who want to learn more beyond just this free 1 hour. And before we dive into the top 10 secrets, let me give you a quick background of who I am and why you'd even want to listen to me in the first place. My name is Patra Uwalbeck. I'm based out of Salt Lake City, Utah. I started video about 7 years ago at the age of 22 and spent about 3 years working for a YouTuber named Devin Supertramp, where I had the opportunity to travel all over the world creating videos for big name brands. I then branched off and started my own production company, quickly scaling my own business and landing video clients in a wide variety of industries like weddings, luxury real estate, music videos, commercials, events, etc. And along the way, I've grown my own YouTube channel to currently over 500,000 subscribers, and have had the opportunity to work with big names like Imagine Dragons, Tony Hawk, Hyundai, LG, Canon, Huawei, and many more. In a nutshell, I've learned what it takes to create high quality video and attract high paying clients, and I'm stoked to share those insights with you right now. So let's now dive into my top 10 secrets to creating cinematic shots. Secret number 1 is buying the right gear. This is always the first question people ask me, is what camera should I buy? And my answer is always, well, it depends on what you're going to be shooting and what your budget is. But to give you a general idea, here's a few of my top recommendations in different price ranges. First budget range, $0. If you don't have any money to invest in gear, then just use your smartphone. Most smartphones nowadays can give you high quality 4K video that can be used professionally. If you don't believe me, check out my iPhone versus Red or LG V30 versus Red videos on YouTube, where I show that phones can achieve similar results to that of a $50,000 camera if you know how to use the camera. And for best results on a smartphone, I recommend getting a manual camera app like Filmic Pro that will run you about $15. But in order to take your production value to the next level, I also recommend you invest in a stabilizer to get those smooth moving shots. And the one I use and recommend is the FreeFly Mobi, which sells for $300, or you can get cheaper ones like the Xeon Smooth Q that costs about $100. Either way, I'd invest in a stabilizer, as it will take those smartphone videos to the next level. Moving into our next price range, for just $600, you can pick up a beginner DSLR and a kit lens, and the best beginner camera that I'd recommend is the Canon SL2 or the Canon M50. I recently shot a short film using just the SL2 handheld to prove that you can get great results with cheap gear, again, if you know how to use the camera. There's also other great beginner options out there like the Panasonic G7, the Sony a6300, but I personally love Canon cameras for their amazing in-camera colors and their superior autofocus and their great lens options. Every manufacturer is going to have its pros and cons. Like Sony is great for low light, so it just kind of depends on which features are most important to you. Now, if you have a little bit more money, around $1,000, then I'd say look into getting a nicer lens and a stabilizer for your beginning DSLR. Lenses are just as important as the camera bodies, and depending on what you shoot, I'd recommend either getting a wide-angle lens, 50mm prime, or a standard lens like a Sigma 17-50, and we'll talk more about lens choice in a later secret. But for stabilizers, I personally love and recommend the GlideCam HD Pro or the DJI Ronin S, and you can get both of those for around $500. There's pros and cons to each, and you can see an in-depth comparison in the course, but basically each is going to be better for certain types of videos. Overall, I do prefer the GlideCam in more situations, as it does allow for more control, but it definitely is harder to learn how to use. Now, there are other cheaper options out there like the Flycam Red King that you can get for $200, and it actually stacks up really well to the GlideCam. Again, full comparison in the course, but I wouldn't recommend going much cheaper than that for a stabilizer. The point is, investing in a good stabilizer will be incredibly important to creating cinematic shots. Moving on to our next price range, for around $1,000 for the camera body only, my next recommendation is probably the A6400 or the Panasonic GH4 or the Canon 80D. Again, each is going to be better for different reasons. And then for around $2,000, $4,000, the Panasonic GH5S or probably Sony a7 III are your best bang for buck quality images for the price. Again, both very popular for different reasons. And then jumping up to around $5,000, the Canon 1DX Mark II is probably the most popular DSLR and the one that I shoot and use most, mostly because it can film at 4K at 60 frames per second. And I recently did a comparison video stacking up the 1DX to the Sony a7 III, and the a7 III actually beat it out in more categories. So there's definitely comparable options for much less, but again, I love and use the 1DX Mark II as my go-to camera. Now, if you've outgrown the DSLR world and are looking to get into higher-end cinema-grade cameras, a couple good options would be the Blackmagic Ursa Mini, the Panasonic EVA1, and the Canon C200, all sitting around $7,000, and again, pros and cons to each. And if money just isn't an issue and you want to get a top-notch cinema-grade camera, Red cameras are the most popular ones out there that will run you anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000. These are the cameras that have been used on a lot of popular films like Guardians of the Galaxy, Pirates of the Caribbean, Spider-Man, and many more. But again, as I've proven in my YouTube videos, you can get similarly stunning images to a Red camera just by learning how to use a smartphone well. So I always tell people it's pointless to buy expensive gear if you have no idea how to use it well. And that's why I put together Full-Time Filmmaker, and what we'll be focusing on in the rest of this training is teaching you the skills you need to know in order to take advantage of the gear that you already have instead of spending thousands of dollars on better gear in hopes that it's suddenly magically going to make your videos look professional. So let's now teach you how to use your gear. Secret number 2 is choosing the right settings. Here's some of the settings I recommend to achieve that cinematic look. First and foremost, shoot in 24 frames per second. Trust me, people, this is what they shoot Hollywood films at, and this is what your eye is used to seeing when it comes to high quality films. The reason is because it gives a certain motion blur that is easy on the eyes and makes it feel more like a movie. A lot of people starting out will shoot at 30 frames because it looks smoother, but when you shoot at 30 frames, it's going to make it look more like a soap opera or a news broadcast. Now, there are times that I do shoot higher frame rates, but it's when I plan on slowing those frames down to 24 in post. For example, if I shoot at 60 frames and convert it down to 24 in the editing room, that creates slow motion. So 60 frames or higher for slow motion and 24 frames per second when I'm not going to be slowing it down. Another important camera setting is your picture profile. Here's a look at my preferred Canon picture profile. I go to standard with my sharpness turned all the way down to 0, contrast turned down 1, saturation at 0, and color tone at 0. These settings will give you beautiful, vibrant, straight out of camera colors and don't require much work in post. And we've actually built a custom Sony profile as well that matches these Canon colors, but it is a little bit harder to explain how to achieve it, so we provided that full video in the course. Now, some people like to shoot in a flatter profile like log to retain more dynamic range. I personally like to get my colors looking good straight out of camera, especially when shooting on cameras that shoot 8-bit codecs, which is most mirrorless and DSLR cameras, because there's just not enough color information to properly bring back all those colors in post. So that's why I don't like shooting in log, and we'll talk more about coloring in post in a later secret. But if you're new to color grading and or don't want to spend a lot of time in post, then I recommend using a profile that looks good straight out of camera like the one that I just showed you. Moving on to our next setting is white balance. I highly discourage shooting anything auto in camera. Learn how to use your manual settings. We won't go into too much depth here, but as a rule of thumb, when you're outdoors with direct sunlight, you want to be between 5200 and 6000 Kelvin, depending on the time of day. And if you're indoors using only artificial light, usually you want to be between 3 and 4000 Kelvin. Now, the main goal of setting your white balance is to make your whites look white. So find something white in your image and adjust that color temperature manually until your whites look white. Another auto setting to avoid is auto ISO. Typically, your auto ISO setting is going to overexpose your images. So by setting the ISO manually, you can dial in the exact exposure you want, which is usually going to be a little bit dimmer than what your auto ISO would have done, which is going to make sure that your highlights aren't blown out and your image looks more professional. And a great tool to help you dial in a perfect exposure is to use your histogram, which is this graph that reads the exposure and tells you whether you're underexposed, which puts all the information to the left, or whether it's overexposed, which puts all the information to the right. You want your image information to sit somewhere in the middle and is spread out evenly throughout your histogram rather than bunching it all up to one of the two sides. And our last setting we'll talk about here is shutter speed. As a rule of thumb, you want to make sure your shutter speed is twice your frame rate. So when shooting at 24 frames per second, you'll want a shutter speed of 1/50th. This will give you the most natural motion blur that your eyes are used to seeing in real life. And we'll talk about aperture more in another secret, but in order to get both your shutter speed and aperture low at the same time, which will allow you to get that shallow depth of field, you'll need to use use an ND filter or polarizer. I use a variable ND filter and polarizers from Polar Pro that costs around $200 to $300. And I also use Polar Pro's filters as well for my drones. And I like using polarizers over standard NDs a lot of times because polarizers cut out the sun's reflection, making colors pop more and giving the appearance of increased dynamic range as it softens the highlights from the sun reflection. So when shooting outdoors, I always try and use my ND polarizers. But point is, learn how to use manual camera settings to achieve great exposure using all the tools in your camera, and your shots are going to look a lot more professional. Moving on to cinematic secret number 3 is creating movement. I think movement is the biggest thing that separates my films from so many others, is my ability to move the camera in a way that immerses my audience into the story. So I'm now going to share with you my top 10 gimbal movements and when I like to use them. Here we go. So the first and most common movement that I use is called the push-in or dolly shot. This is when you just move straight forward. And I like to use this as an intro shot to a video to establish a location or show off a wide landscape, or great for real estate to mimic walking through a house. Basically, it's a great way to quickly add movement to any shot as a great alternative to just a static tripod shot. The second movement is the pull-out or reverse dolly, basically the opposite of the push-in, and is achieved by just moving straight back. I like to use pull-outs at the end of videos to help resolve the story and make my audience feel like they are leaving the scene, or I'll sometimes use it to reveal something later on in my shot. Move number 3 is the parallax. This is probably my favorite shot and the movement that I use most, and it's achieved by walking in one direction while panning my camera in the opposite direction. This makes it feel like your subject stays in the same spot while the background is moving behind them. This is a great way to help your audience focus in on the subject while adding that cinematic movement all around them. Move number 4 is the rise up, and this is when I bend my knees, start low, and then move straight up, ending as high as I can to mimic the move that a jib would make. And you can also tilt down while rising up to give a similar parallaxing effect. Move number 5 is the reveal. This is where I find something in my foreground to glide up against to reveal my subject in the background. And this is a great move to use for in-camera transitions to help your edits flow better. Move number 6 is the tilt down. This is where I have something interesting above me that I want to show off, and then I slowly tilt down to reveal my subject. I usually double this with a push-in move for more movement. And the opposite of that would be the tilt up, and this is done by starting with the camera facing on something below me and then slowly tilting up to reveal my subject. Number 7 is the change of focus. This is when I set my focus point close to my subject, then I'll scoot back and start my shot so that my subject is out of focus, and then push in until I hit that focus spot. This is another great way to reveal your subject by starting them out of focus and bringing them into focus, and here's a couple of times when I've done that. Move number 8 is the tracking shot. This includes lead tracking, follow tracking, side tracking. This is basically when you are maintaining the same distance from your subject by moving with them to keep them in the same spot in the frame the whole time. Tracking shots are a great alternative to just panning from a distance to help make your viewer feel like they are in the action. Move number 9 is transition moves. This is where I plan out beforehand 2 different shots that I will stitch together in post. Similar to the reveal shot we talked about, but more purposeful in shooting 2 shots with similar movements that I can stitch together in post, and usually includes passing by something in the foreground so you have something to cut off of, or shooting 2 shots with the exact same movement so that they flow together in the editing room. And I show in the course how to stitch these shots together in the editing room for that seamless transition look. And movement number 10 is low mode. This is where I turn the camera upside down or reverse my gimbal so that I can get as low to the ground as possible, giving my audience a different perspective and more of the hero shot look. So just a great way to mix it up and give new perspectives. So there you go, those are my top 10 gimbal moves. If you can learn and apply these creative moves, it's going to add a lot of emotion and energy to your films. Now, one quick note, just having a gimbal doesn't guarantee smooth shots. You do have to learn how to actually use them properly, and here's 4 quick tips to make sure your gimbal shots are as smooth as possible. Number 1 is to make sure your gimbal is correctly balanced. A lot of amateurs don't get it balanced well, and so you see a lot of micro movements. Number 2 is learn how to have soft hands for slow, controlled movements. Number 3 is your lens choice. The wider the lens, the more it will hide any imperfections in your movements. And number 4 is to bend your knees and use them as shocks to absorb your up and down movements of your footsteps. We cover those 4 keys to getting smooth shots more in depth in the course and show you exactly how to balance a glide cam or a motorized gimbal and all my exact settings that I like using for my gimbal. But hopefully that at least gives you an idea of what to focus on to improve the smoothness of your shots so you can incorporate clean, steady movements into your videos. Moving on to cinematic secret number 4 is create depth. People often ask what aperture I shoot at. I personally shoot at a 2.8 or lower for most things, and the reason being, when you shoot at a low aperture, it knocks the background out of focus and gives you a shallow depth of field, thus creating more depth to your image. And creating depth is a huge key to achieving cinematic images. Take a look at these two images. There's people in the background of both of these shots, but you can't tell in the shot on the left because the background is out of focus. This helps your viewer focus in on the subject and not get distracted by unimportant background details. Now, depth can also be created by using foreground. So anytime I'm gliding, I'm always looking for some foreground to glide up against to make my image feel more three-dimensional. Another tip for creating depth is to look for leading lines. Find natural lines around you, like in bridges or fences or anything that helps lead your eye to the center of the image. This is going to create depth and help your images look more cinematic. And probably the best way to create depth is through lighting, which is cinematic secret number 5. Lighting is one of the most important elements to great cinematography and probably the least understood and least appreciated among beginners. Here's an example of how much an image can change by changing just the lighting. As you can see, the second image with good lighting has a lot more depth, and there's a few reasons why. The first reason is shadows on my face. I've positioned the light 45 degrees and slightly above the subject so that it casts a drop shadow on the chin and cheek. This shadow makes the face look more three-dimensional, thus creating depth. Now, there's all kinds of lighting patterns that can be applied for different looks. We won't go over them here, but in the course we talk in depth about how to achieve different looks for different scenarios and when to use hard versus soft light and how to create those different qualities of light. But another reason why this image has more depth is because of the color contrast. By lighting up my background blue, it contrasts my orange skin, which is on the opposite spectrum of the color wheel, thus making my face pop out more from the background and again creating depth. And the last factor that's creating more depth is that the light on my face is brighter than the light on the background. So by having contrastive exposures, again, helps the subject stand out from the background and create depth. In short, lighting is a huge element in creating cinematic images. And again, we talk more in depth in the course on how to control and shape that light for creating cinematic images. Now you may be asking, what if you're shooting in natural light, where your only light source is the sun that you have no control over? Well, here's a few tips for shooting in natural light. Number 1 is time of day. The best time of day to shoot, for those who don't know, is during golden hour. This is the first hour of light in the morning and the last hour of light at night. The reason being is that the light is lower in the sky and it creates a more flattering, beautiful light, versus if you shoot at noonday when the sun is directly overhead, it's much less flattering and the colors outside are less saturated. So I always try and schedule my shoots around golden hour. Another reason for shooting at golden hour is that it allows you to use the sun as backlight, which is tip number 2, that is camera direction. I personally love shooting into the sun because when you use the sun as your backlight, it gives you these beautiful sun flares coming in and out of your image, which is a super popular cinematic look. Using the sun as backlight also creates even light on your subject's face versus having your subject's face being lit directly by the sunlight. In this example, the subjects on the left have raccoon eyes because the sun is directly overhead and in front of them. You can see all these harsh shadows on the face and they're squinting because the sun's in their eyes, versus on the right, their eyes are wide open, there's no squinting, no harsh shadows on the face, just nice even light. So I highly recommend, especially if you're shooting people's faces and you don't have time or manpower to set up a diffuser, to place the sun behind them. Now there are times when I like to use sun as a front light source. Here's an example of shooting a landscape on a cloudy day and then that same shot, but with the landscape being lit by the sun. Look how much more color it adds to have the sun out. So when doing landscapes, I like it to be super sunny, and in this case, that meant having to wait around for about a half hour till the weather changed so I could get a better shot. Which brings me to our third tip for shooting in natural light, and that is the weather. If you can, try and wait for the sun to come out because it's going to help your images pop more, but if the clouds do come out, it's not always a bad thing. There are certain things that actually look better with clouds. For instance, shooting weddings or people's faces are great for cloudy days because clouds act as a giant diffuser, which softens the light and creates a more flattering look on people's faces. So figure out how to use different weather patterns to your advantage. If it's rainy or snowy, some people just put their camera away, but for me, that's the best time to get epic slow motion shots because you have that rain or snow creating movement, so when you slow it down, it looks super epic. And again, we cover lighting in depth in the course, but needless to say, lighting is probably the single biggest factor that separates amateur looking films from professionals. Going back to the camera gear not being as important as the skills behind the camera, I let my buddy Tanner borrow my $8,000 C200 camera, and this was the image he produced with it. Super amateur looking. So I went over to his studio, spent $300 on cheap lights and some acoustic foam, set it all up, and here were the results. And the twist is, this after image was shot on my $600 SL2 just to prove that the camera doesn't make the difference, but the skills behind it. So take some time to learn how to use lighting, folks. Moving on to cinematic secret number 6 is camera angles. People always ask what camera angles should they cover. Now there are 5 basic camera angles that they'll teach you in film school. Number 1 being the wide angle, which is usually your establishing shots. Number 2 is the long full body, which is kind of like a wide shot, but usually on a tighter focal length that covers from head to toe of your subject. Number 3 is the medium shot, which is just the waist up. Number 4 is the tight or close-up shot, which is usually just the face. And number 5 is the detailed or extreme close-up shot, which focuses in on specific details. And you can mix up those angles by doing low angles to show more power and dominance, or higher angles to show vulnerability and weakness. And I like to live by something that I call the 5-shot rule. When I'm covering an important piece of action, I like to cover it from 5 different angles. Here's an example of a music video I shot for a local band. I started the video with a wide establishing shot to show off the location. Then I cut to some tight shots of different band members' faces and their instruments. Then I mix in some medium shots of the waist up and some long full body shots here and there, and occasionally an extreme close-up to show off specific details. I even did some drone shots to show a high angle for a new perspective. And I did 20 total takes on this shoot, but made sure to cover those 20 takes from a variety of angles so that I had the freedom and flexibility in the editing room to cut between those different angles to give the viewer a much more dynamic viewing experience. And using this principle of camera angles, here is a short 1-minute video I threw together showing you the difference of a scene shot from one camera angle and then shooting that same scene from 6 different camera angles, cutting between them to show how much more life it adds to your story when you use camera angles. Check it out.
You can't define it. You can't destroy it. It makes your nerves look like steel. It's in your heart. It makes time stand still. It's where legends are born in the final seconds of the game. Boomtown.
So there you have it. That shows the importance of using camera angles. And just FYI, I didn't have multiple cameras on this. Again, I just reshot the same scene over and over again from a bunch of different angles and then worked my magic in the editing room to piece it together. Now you'll also notice that in the editing process, I added sound effects, cinematic music, a voiceover, slow motion, color grading, aspect ratio. So there's a lot of other things that went into making this more cinematic. We cover all that in the course, but camera angles was a big part of making this more cinematic. Moving on to cinematic secret number 7 is perspective or lens choice. Which lens should you use and when? This is a topic that took me several years to understand, and I was honestly just guessing for a long time. So what I'm about to tell you will save you years of guessing if you pay attention. First and foremost, my favorite lens is my 16-35 wide angle lens. Wide angle lenses are great for things like landscapes because the wide field of view allows me to see more of my surrounding scenery. They're also great for shooting real estate as it makes houses look bigger, or when I'm shooting action adventure type stuff when I want to get really close to the action while still being able to see my full subject in the frame. But times that I don't use 16mm is when I'm doing a close-up on the human face. As you can see, it distorts the facial features and isn't very flattering. And it's been said that between 70 and 100mm is the most flattering focal length for the human face. So when I'm shooting something like a wedding or portraits, I always pop on my standard lens, my 24-70, and this allows me to zoom into 70 when I'm shooting tights on the face, but I still have the flexibility to get pretty wide shots by zooming out to 24mm to get those wide group shots of the whole family. A standard lens like the 24-70 is probably going to be your most versatile all-purpose lens for shooting things like events, so that's probably the first lens I'd recommend people getting. My next favorite lenses to use though are my Sigma Art prime lenses like my 20mm, my 50mm, and my 85mm. Prime lenses are generally going to be sharper and they can go down to a 1.4 aperture, which means you can get even more shallow depth of field, and this will also allow you to shoot in lower light situations. My 20mm is the lens that I'm using right now that I use for a lot of my tutorials. 50mm 50mm is the focal length that's been said to most closely replicate what the human eye sees. So anytime I'm filming something documentary style where I want my audience to feel like they are there in the room, I pop on my 50mm lens. And my 85mm is great for getting tight detail shots. Probably my least used lens is my 70-200. It's really great for when you can't get close enough to your subject, like at sporting events or live stage presentations. So that's also a great lens to have in your arsenal. But there you have a look at my favorite lenses and some of the times that I use them. Moving on to cinematic secret number 8 is keeping focus. Everything could be perfect about your shot, but if it's out of focus, it's not usable. So one of the biggest questions I get is, how do I keep my subject in focus while I'm doing moving shots? So here's my 4 main tips for staying in focus. Number 1, get a camera with really good in-video autofocus, like Canon's dual pixel autofocus. Sony cameras also have really great autofocus, but not quite as good as Canon. Those are probably the only 2 manufacturers that I trust with autofocus systems, but others are catching up and getting better every year. Now, I probably use autofocus 80% of the time on my shoots because the technology is just that good, but when I'm using cinema cameras like my Red that don't have autofocus, here are some tips for using manual focus. Tip number 2 is to set your focus on your subject and then maintain the same distance from your subject throughout the entire shot. And if you need to change your distance at any time during the shot, then you'll just have to refocus at that new distance. Tip number 3 is for a more handheld look. I will just hold the shaft of my glide cam and change focus as I move closer and farther away. Or if you use something like a Zoom Crane or a DJI Ronin S, they have focus wheels that allow you to rack focus manually as you move. And then tip number 4 is to use a higher aperture, like between 16 and 22, so that everything is in focus. This is the option I choose when I'm shooting wider shots like landscapes, because I want most of my image to be in focus, and this will give you more leeway moving closer and farther away from your subject while still keeping them in focus. So there you have some tips on how to keep your subject in focus. Now, assuming that you follow all the first 8 tips that I've just taught you, you should have some pretty cinematic looking images by now. But there's more to great videos than just what the image looks like. You also need to know how to tell a story with those beautiful images, which leads me to our next secret number 9, and that is storytelling. People always ask me for tips on how to tell a great story. They tell me that when they watch my videos, they feel so happy or motivated or inspired, and ultimately that's the number 1 goal of storytelling, to create emotion. And you'll know you've succeeded at telling a story if you can successfully evoke a certain emotional response from your audience. And depending on the type of story you're trying to tell will depend on the emotion that you're trying to create. For a wedding video, you probably want to create emotions of love and happiness and joy. For a travel video, you probably want to make your viewer feel inspired, motivated, or entertained. For real estate videos, you probably want to create an inviting, luxurious, peaceful, comfortable feeling. So determine beforehand, before you start the project, what emotion you want to evoke, and this will be the foundation for your story that will help shape the way you shoot your footage and the way you edit it together. And because I believe that half of the storytelling takes place in the editing room, it is crucial that you learn how to shoot to edit. What I mean by that is have a vision of what your final video is going to look like and the emotion you want to create with that final video, so that while you're shooting, you are making sure that every shot and every movement is motivated by the end story you're trying to tell and the emotion you're trying to create. For example, if you're trying to create an emotion of fear, you probably want to use a shaky handheld look with your camera movements. If you're trying to create an emotion of peace or serenity, then you probably want to use slow, smooth moving shots. If you want to create an emotion of adrenaline, you'll probably want to use a fast-paced camera movement and quicker editing. The problem I see with a lot of filmmakers is they don't have a clear vision of what their final video is going to look like and the emotions they want to create. They're just shooting to have footage, and I guess we'll just figure out how to piece it all together in the editing room. And though a lot can be done in the editing room to create a story out of nothing, I promise your final video will turn out much better if you're shooting every shot, every angle, every movement with your edit in mind. So take some time to visualize your end product and the emotions you want to convey before you start shooting. But like I said, shooting the footage is only half the storytelling. The other half is done in the editing room, which brings me to the second half of storytelling and our last and final secret number 10, and that is the editing. A lot of people don't realize that half of the cinematicness of my videos happens in the editing room. I can take average footage and make it look great, and great footage and make it look amazing because of my editing skills. And the editing software I use is Adobe Premiere Pro, and if you look closely, Adobe actually uses my footage that I shot in Guatemala as their demo footage when you first open up the app, which is kind of cool. But in the course, I actually teach from both Premiere and Final Cut Pro X, so it doesn't matter which one you use, the course teaches both. And just FYI, one of the greatest perks of joining Full-Time Filmmaker is that all members get the Adobe Creative Cloud student discount, which will save you $360 a year in software expenses. So that perk alone will cover the cost of joining in just a couple of years. But I now want to give you a few editing tips to help you tell more engaging, more cinematic stories that help evoke emotion. Tip number 1 is your shot selection. I will oftentimes use less than 5% of all the footage I shot in my final edit, because when I shoot to edit, I make sure to get plenty of angles, several takes if possible, using different focal lengths and different movement styles so that I have options in the editing room. But just because I shot the footage doesn't mean I have to use it. Only take the best of the best. If you have two shots that are very similar, determine which one helps tell your story better and omit the other one. I see too many videos full of average or repetitive footage. Every shot I put in a video has a purpose. Don't use clips just because you shot them or just to fill time and make your edits longer. If you don't love it, omit it. Tip number 2 is music choice and sound design. This is huge. Audio is half of the viewing experience. What people hear tells half the story, creates half the emotion. That's why I'm so picky when it comes to music choice. Why would I spend a full day or sometimes a week shooting amazing visuals and put zero time and effort into selecting the audio that accompanies it? Don't just pick the first song that you find, dig deep and listen to a lot of different tracks and play it alongside your footage and ask yourself, does this song help bring out the emotion of the footage, or does it distract or compete with the footage? And then keep searching until you find the song that brings out the most emotion. And the main sites I get my music from are the following: premiumbeat.com, MusicBed, Soundstripe, Artlist, and Audio Jungle. Usually from one of those 5 sites, I can find a song to license that fits my footage and brings emotion. And I actually worked out a deal with Soundstripe to give 20% off their services so full-time filmmakers can get unlimited music licensing for just $100 a year. And I've also worked out a similar deal with Artlist to give you first 2 months for free. But aside from the music, another aspect that many beginners leave out of their edits is the sound design. Take a listen to one of my edits with and without sound design. Now, some of those sounds were captured in real life, and I try and capture as much clean audio as I can while on location, but a lot of that audio was added in post, and that's called sound design, when you add more sounds on top of your existing audio to beefing it up. If you look at my project file here, you can see that sometimes I have 6 or 7 layers of sound that all combine to help the audio feel more full and make it feel like you're actually there. And I actually include some slow motion sound effects for free in the course. And to help you start building a library of sound effects, I also provide a link where you can download a huge library of quality sound effects for free. But point is, audio is huge, don't neglect it. Moving on to our third editing tip is color grading. Without going too in depth about color theory, know that using different color grades can manipulate the footage to convey certain emotions. For example, warmer tones usually convey happier, lighter emotions and will be seen in movies like romances. Cooler tones usually convey more dramatic emotions and will oftentimes be seen in thrillers or horror films. Desaturated colors convey a dead, lifeless emotion and are oftentimes used in apocalyptic movies. Vibrant, saturated colors convey a feeling full of life and are used in films like comedies for a more lighthearted, upbeat feeling. And for pretty much every type of film, you're going to see a good amount of orange and teal being used to give you the epic Hollywood blockbuster look. Many people on YouTube refer to this as the Sam Colder look, and I actually provide some of my favorite orange and teal LUTs for free in the course and links where to download other awesome free LUTs as well. But just to give you an idea of my general color grading process, I'm going to now show you how to create that orange and teal look without using any LUTs at all. So here I have a clip that I shot on a smartphone just to show you that it doesn't matter how nice the camera is, you can still create great looks in post. And my first step would be to come to Lumetri Color in Premiere Pro. And for this image specifically, I'm going to warm it up just a little bit because it was shot at golden hour and I want to give it that golden hour look. Next, I'm going to bring up the exposure just a tad to 0.5, but you'll notice that kind of blew out my highlights a little bit over here. So I'm going to come to my highlight slider and just bring those highlights back a little. And because my subject is a little bit underexposed, I'm going to bring up my shadows a tad, and I'll usually add a touch of saturation as well. Then I'd come down to my curves tab and add an S curve. It's called an S curve because it's shaped like an S. Basically what this does is give some contrast to your image and make it pop off the screen. Now is where we give it more of a stylized look by coming down here to our hue versus hue, and then just bring everything but our skin tones up to make our blues more teal and all of our other colors more orange. Then I'd come down to my hue versus saturation and just bring down my teal saturation a little bit, and then come to my hue versus luma and get my yellows and oranges and bring back some of that blown out sky. So there you have it. That's pretty much all the tools I use on 90% of my color grades, and a quick look at how you can achieve the orange and teal look without using LUTs. Now obviously every clip is different, so you can't do the exact same process for every clip, but that should at least give you a good starting point and a good idea of my color grading process. But that's it for my editing tips. Again, editing is a huge part of the storytelling process, the shots you choose, and in what order you decide to put them to what music with what color grade. This all combines to convey certain emotions. But there you go, guys. That wraps up my top 10 secrets to creating cinematic videos. Hopefully you took some good notes and gained some valuable insights and can start implementing some of those immediately. If you'd like to learn more beyond just those 10 secrets, we have over 200 video tutorials totaling over 40 hours of content, and it's all jam-packed with value just like this training. And just to give you an idea of what's in the course, we have a section dedicated to helping you buy the best gear, another teaching you all the technical aspects of how to use that gear, another focusing on the creative aspects like lighting and storytelling, another showing you my full in-depth editing process from beginning to end. We also have a full business section dedicated to showing you how to land clients and how to make money with your video skills, which is what I want to talk about next in this training, is my 6 steps that I took to making 6 figures a year with my production company. But before we dive into the business side of things, I want to put a discount up on your screen for anyone who wants to learn more beyond this training. Again, Full-Time Filmmaker is 200 plus videos. That does include all the mini courses I've put out, like the real estate course, weddings, music videos, commercials, the editing workflows. So all the content I've put out is included in this Full-Time Filmmaker course. And in each of these sections of the course, I have virtual job shadow videos that show you how I operate in each unique shooting environment, so that no matter what shoot you're going into, you can have the confidence to know how to approach it. And on top of all the training content, we also provide discounts on various kinds of gear like Rhino sliders, Westcott lights, Zoom cranes, used glide cams, and even some Apple products. And as mentioned already, 60% off the Adobe Creative Cloud suite. We also even have Red Giant discounts, giving you 50% off any Red Giant software. So tons of great discounts that, if you take advantage of them, could save you thousands of dollars. Now we also have a private Facebook group of over 7,000 current members from 100 different countries who've already joined and have seen great results with their businesses. And many of them who have attended film school have told me that Full-Time Filmmaker summed up in 2 weeks what they learned in 2 years at college. So as valued by our current members, this program is worth the equivalent of several years at film school, which can run you tens of thousands of dollars, but we are currently pricing it at just $7.99. And as an exclusive discount for you right now for watching this training, you can get an additional 25% off and join the lifetime membership to Full-Time Filmmaker for just $5.99. And because we're so confident in the value of this course, we have a 30-day full refund money-back guarantee. So if you don't end up liking the course, then we don't want your money. We only want your money if we can help you make more money than what you spent on the course by helping you land paying clients with the knowledge we give you. And I'm confident that if you apply what I teach, it'll help you land a whole lot more than one extra client. So feel free to take advantage of the discount if you want to immediately up your video skills, and we'll talk more about the full program at the end to answer all of your questions. But let's now dive into the second half of this training and show you my 6 steps to 6 figures by sharing with you my story of how I went from 0 to full-time with my video production company. So how did I get started, and how did I scale my business to a 6-figure income? This is one of the biggest questions I get asked. People want to know, what is the first step to take to get started in this business, and how do you scale that? So let's rewind all the way back to what motivated me to get into filmmaking in the first place. 7 years ago, I had 0 filmmaking education, 0 experience, and I didn't even own a camera. I was knocking doors selling DirecTV in the hot weather of Texas, absolutely hating my job. I dreaded waking up every morning and going to work, but I needed the money, and I think that's where a lot of people are at in life, especially people who are in college or high school, is they're trying to figure out how to get by financially while also finding something that they actually want to do for a career. And one night after a long day of knocking doors, I came across a quote by Steve Jobs that inspired me to change my life. It reads, "Your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking, don't settle." Now, I was currently settling for a job that I didn't love, so I made the commitment right then and there that I wasn't going to do something that I hated just to make money, but rather I was going to find something that I truly loved doing so that I could achieve great work in my lifetime. So I quit my job the next day and drove 17 hours back to Utah, and I started searching for my real passion. That's when I came came across a video on YouTube by a guy named Devin Supertramp, and I immediately fell in love with what he was doing and decided that is what I wanted to do as well. So I dove in head first, spent my life savings on buying my first camera setup, a used Canon T3i, a Tokina 11-16 wide-angle lens, and a Glidecam HD 2000, totaling $1,300. Now that was a lot of money for me at the time, but this is the first of my 6 steps to being successful, and that is being willing to invest in yourself. You need to be willing to invest in professional gear if you want to be paid as a professional. So my advice is don't be too cheap, buy gear that will help you deliver high quality footage and stand out from all the average filmmakers that are already out there. And I've already given you all my gear recommendations in different price ranges to get you started. But the point is, be willing to take risks, maybe even go into debt a little. It's kind of like paying money for an education. Be willing to invest in your future. I can't emphasize that enough. But as soon as my fancy new gear arrived, I realized that I had no idea how to use it. So I spent the rest of that summer watching frustrating YouTube tutorials trying to teach myself how to use everything. And I'm sure a lot of you have been in the same scenario where you spend an hour looking for a tutorial and you finally find one that looks promising, but it's 20 minutes long and you're lucky if you get 30 seconds of useful information out of it. Huge waste of time. I know how it goes, and that's a huge reason why I created Full-Time Filmmaker, is because I wanted to give people an alternative to traditional film school, which is going to cost you a ton of money, and an alternative to spending months and years of your life watching frustrating YouTube tutorials and learning from your own mistakes. Now, I personally took the YouTube route starting out, but I'm going to teach you in a minute how you can grow and learn 10 times faster. That is much better than YouTube. But moving on to our second step to being successful is mastering your skills. What separates you from other filmmakers out there? No one is going to hire you over someone else if their videos are better than yours. Now, this process of mastering your skills is going to take time. How much time is up to you, depending on what you invest in as far as education goes. But more than just being educated is actually getting out and shooting and developing as you go. And during that process, you're going to have to learn an important principle that I had to learn, and that is to be confident. When you first start out, you're going to suck. No one masters their skills overnight, but they do it by attempting things that make them uncomfortable, by doing things that they don't know how to do yet. An example of this was my first event I ever shot. A couple months after buying my first camera setup, I was at this paint dance at my local university, and while dancing with my friends, I noticed that nobody was filming the event, and I immediately recognized it as an opportunity to pose myself as the professional filmmaker on campus. So I ran back to my car, grabbed my camera gear, jumped over the fence, hopped up on stage, and just pretended like I knew what I was doing and like I was the one who was hired to film the event. And I just started faking it till I made it. I didn't feel confident, but I acted confident, and pretty soon everyone else was confident in me and thought that I was the guy who was hired to film the event. I then took that footage home, pulled an all-nighter editing together a video, posted it on YouTube the next day, and everybody started sharing it like crazy. Everyone loved the video, including the administration, who saw the video, pulled me into their office and said, "We want to give you a scholarship so you shoot the rest of our events just like that." And I was like, absolutely, I'd take a scholarship. And just like that, I went from knowing nothing about filmmaking to becoming the director of cinematography at Southern Utah University. And all of a sudden, all these new doors started to open up. New clients came pouring in wanting my video services, which leads me to step number 3, and that is build a portfolio. This is huge. You need to have demo videos to show clients in order for them to trust that you can pull off a certain level of quality. I landed a scholarship based off of that one paint dance video, which led me to film more events, and those events led the gymnastics coach to see my work and hire me to film all their meets, which led someone else to see those videos and hire me for something else. The best way to get work is to create work. You need to build a portfolio of videos in order to get noticed. And many ask me at this point, well, what should I film? And I always say, film whatever you want to get hired for. If you want to film weddings, then go film a few free weddings so that you have a portfolio to show engaged couples that can land you some gigs. And this leads me to step number 4, and that is market yourself. Even if you don't feel confident in your skill level yet, you have to put your work out there. Post your work on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, send out emails to businesses, create a website. The more eyeballs that see your work, the greater the likelihood that someone will see that video and want to hire you. Without fail, every time I post a new video on social media, I get more job offers. I don't even advertise myself as a wedding videographer, but because of one wedding video that I posted on YouTube, I've gotten 1 to 2 wedding video inquiries every week for the past 2 years. And I talk more in depth in the program about SEO strategies on how to share videos most effectively to increase total viewership and also how to build a following on social media. But moving on to step number 5 is build relationships. As I mentioned, YouTube videos was a good baseline for me, a good foundation, but what 10x'd my growth was having a mentor. Building a relationship with Devin Supertramp and his circle of influence was huge to my success. You've all heard that it's not what you know, it's who you know, and that is absolutely true. And that's why Full-Time Filmmaker has been so effective in helping so many people succeed succeed in their video businesses is because they had me there to mentor them and help them every step of the way. And this answers one of the biggest questions I get is people saying, why would I buy your course if I can just watch YouTube videos for free? My answer, in short, you can only learn so much on YouTube for free before you have to level up and get into the courses, the mentors, the cheat codes to real life, the real secrets that can take your skills to the next level. In an oversaturated market full of average YouTube tutorial watching videographers, what are you doing to separate yourself from the crowd? I chose to surround myself with successful people and latch on to mentors and pay for courses and for experts, and that's when my career really started to take off. And again, that's what full-time filmmaker is, giving you access to me and dozens of other successful filmmakers so you can build relationships, use those mentors, shorten your learning curve, and start becoming an expert like them and not drowned in the sea of average YouTube watching videographers. And just a couple examples of some of our full-time filmmaker members who have applied this principle of building relationships. One of our members networked his way to being a part of Will Smith's YouTube channel film crew. Another networked his way to shooting social media content for the Major League Baseball Association, allowing him to go film the World Series. And I personally got hired to edit several Imagine Dragon videos because I built a relationship with Dan Reynolds' assistant, who then showed the band my edits, who then hired me. So networking is a huge part to landing high-paying jobs, and in our private community, you'll have a lot of opportunities to do just that. But one of the biggest keys to building these types of relationships is our last and final step, number 6, and that is add value first. When you approach people in higher places than you, do not approach it with the attitude of, hey, I need help from you. You have to add value first. Think about what you can do to add value to that person you are approaching and offer your help to them. And then over time, that value will always get returned tenfold. One way that I've done this is by applying a principle that I call free to fee. Be willing to work for free before you charge a fee. I promise you, if you go into a company and say, hey, I want to take your backpack around Southern Utah and make a free commercial for you, of course they're going to say yes. And that's actually exactly what I did with the company Cotopaxi. And then I sent them the final video and they said, man, this is amazing. We'd like to hire you to go to Hawaii to do the same thing. And I said, awesome. I charge $5,000 per video. And that's how I've gotten a lot of my work, especially starting out, is by offering my services for free, adding value first to other people so they can see how much value I can bring to their businesses, and then them wanting to make more videos. Now, keep in mind that the company that you make a free video for isn't always the one that's going to hire you. The bigger reason to do free work is to build your portfolio like we talked about, so that you have something to show other clients what you're capable of. An example of this was a couple years ago, I shot an iPhone versus Red video on my own dime, in my own time, and posted it on YouTube. And a year later, LG saw it and asked me if I'd make something similar for their new LG V30 that was coming out, and they gave me a whopping $40,000 budget to do so. Same thing happened a year later. I shot another video with my own money in Hawaii showing off the new iPhone XS, and a couple months later, Huawei saw that video, asked me if they could hire me for a campaign for their new P30 Pro, and that's the way I've been able to attract a lot of big clients, is by creating my own content for free, putting it out there online for people to see, and then companies with big budgets coming to me wanting me to create something similar. And I'll usually get a handful of you guys saying, you should never do free work because then clients will just expect you to do free work forever. But that, my friends, is the problem with most creative minds. Artists usually aren't the most business savvy people, but business skills can be learned. And if you learn how to communicate and negotiate and to correctly set prices for your work without undervaluing your services or overvaluing them and losing the job, then you'll be able to make a good living making videos. And I go over this in depth in the course, teaching you how to set prices by using a series of questions to ask your clients to ensure that you get paid what you're worth. And we also built out a budget calculator that allows you to identify where your skill set is to help you know what your day rate should be for shooting and editing, and allows you to input various details and what you should charge for those in order to appropriately price each project. But there you have it, guys. Those are my 6 steps to making money, and that's how I've gone from making less than $10,000 in my first year to over 6 figures a year now. And the coolest part is, because I can now charge so much money per project, it has freed me up to help other people do the same with their businesses. Because as I started finding a lot of success and building a large social media following, I was constantly being asked by people about my filmmaking process, people wanting to know how to break into this industry. So one day I finally posted on Instagram saying, what do you guys want to learn from me? I'll build some tutorials. And I got about 200 questions back. So I then took all those questions and I organized them chronologically from beginning to end, everything one would need to know in order to become a professional filmmaker, even if they were a beginner. And then I took all those questions, scripted over 100 pages of organized answers, and then I spent the next 6 months filming and editing training videos into what is now Full-Time Filmmaker. Over 200 organized training videos taking you from beginning to end, everything you need to know to turn this into a full-time career. And I keep adding more videos every month as I keep learning new things, so I want to keep the learning relevant and up to date. And you can see a full list of that 200 video curriculum on the offer page below. But needless to say, I think we have the most complete and concise curriculum out there, and our members are raving about this program all the time. And again, you can read some of their success stories on the offer page. But aside from the curriculum, we also have some super valuable bonuses that I've already mentioned. One is our private community where you can network and build relationships. This is where I answer most of people's questions, and also where I do Feedback Fridays, where every week I'll break down an individual's video, tell them exactly what they need to improve, and share it with the rest of the group so everyone else can learn from their mistakes. And we also do regular live Q&A sessions where I sit down and answer any questions you guys have for me so that you can have access to that personal mentor. And as another bonus that I haven't mentioned, we also hold biannual video contests where the winner can take home $500 per contest. So lots of fun activities going on to help encourage you to get out and shoot. Also, as another bonus, I occasionally allow in-person job shadowers to my shoots where I share my shoot schedule on the Facebook group, telling everybody where I'm going to be filming and invite you to come out and learn on set. And for those who can't make it in person, I always have one person there filming behind the scenes, and we do a virtual job shadow that we then post to the group. And a couple other bonuses that come with the course. I'm also throwing in 40 free music tracks and a full list of my top cinematic artists that I like to use, 20 of my most used slow motion sound effects, free orange and teal LUTs, Premiere Pro smooth zoom transition presets, my keyboard shortcuts, raw footage from some of my shoots with corresponding Premiere Pro project files so you can see in depth every step I take in the editing process so that you can replicate that. And I also provide my release waiver form and invoice templates to assist you in running your business. So there it is. That is Full-Time Filmmaker. That's what it includes. It's a lifetime membership. There's only one upfront cost, and you'll have access to all the current content and all future content for life. You can watch as many times as you want at your own pace, at your computer or your phone. And again, my ultimate goal with this program is to help people make a return on their investment. So I'll be teaching you how to make money in a large number of industries. Here's just a few industries that I've personally stepped into that have all been big money makers for me. High-end luxury real estate, wedding videos, events, action sports, music videos, corporate videos, travel and tourism videos, shooting stock footage, YouTube branded sponsorships, tutorials, online courses, documentaries, independent films, and so much more. With so much versatility in this job, guys, I feel like there's never a shortage of business, and I never get bored because I'm always shooting something different every week. Or if you just want to specialize in one of those industries, I personally know wedding videographers who make 6 figures a year just shooting weddings, and I know that's possible in just about any of those industries. So what I'm getting at is that there's never been a better time to get into filmmaking. The digital video industry has been on the rise for many years, and it will continue to grow each year as more and more businesses realize the value of video for marketing and advertising their products. Again, if you're afraid that it's too oversaturated, realize that it's only oversaturated with a bunch of average videographers. If you take the steps necessary to elevate yourself as an expert, you will have more work than you know what to do with. I personally turn down 90% of the job offers that I get and only take the funnest and high-paying clients. I only do maybe 7 or 8 video projects a year now, but with those 7 or 8 projects, I still make 6 figures a year with my video production company. And that's the whole point of Full-Time Filmmaker, guys, is to help you elevate your skills, get you above the crowd, make you an expert so that you're not just another dude or chick with a camera. And speaking of chick, yes, we have hundreds of females in the group as well. Girls can be just as successful in this field as men. Doesn't matter what gender you are, doesn't matter your age, doesn't matter what location, there is always room to succeed. The only person standing in your way to becoming a master at video is you and your work ethic. Ball's in your court, folks. The offer is there. 30-day money-back guarantee is in place. Now, if you still have any questions or doubts about joining, I'm super accessible. Shoot me an email at support@fulltimefilmmaker.com. I always respond within 24 hours. But before you do email me, let me answer a few of my most frequently asked questions. First question: what is the success rate of people who join Full-Time Filmmaker? Now, I recently did a poll in the private Facebook group and found that over 40% of the Full-Time Filmmaker students are working part or full-time as filmmakers. And over 50% said that it was just too early to tell because they hadn't been at it long enough, leaving less than 10% who said they were struggling to make money creating video content. So success rate is pretty high as long as you apply what I teach in the course. And it's funny because my logo of me holding up my camera has become the new symbol for when somebody in the group goes full-time, so it's fun seeing all the different poses as people celebrate their full-time filmmakerhood. Another question people ask me is, should I go to film school? Now, I personally never went to film school, so I can't have a firm opinion on this, but according to the paying members that have gone to film school, most have told me that they found more value in full-time filmmaker. But honestly, it just depends on the school, as there are pros and cons to each school. Personally, though, I think your better learning opportunities for skills like this are going to be in online courses and mentors. Another question I get a lot is, are all the mini courses included in full-time filmmaker? Yes. I've put out several mini courses that all sell for around $150 to $200 a piece, like my real estate course, my travel video course, my Premiere editing course, my Final Cut Pro editing course. All of these mini courses are included in full-time filmmaker. The only course that's not included in full-time filmmaker is my new course that you may have heard of called Course Creator Pro, which teaches people how to build, market, and sell online courses by using Facebook ad campaigns like the one you probably clicked on to get to this webinar. And I teach you how to run effective webinars like the one you're watching right now. And I teach you how to build great courses to retain customers once they've actually purchased. Like I mentioned, I offer a 30-day refund policy. And the reason is because we have a 95% satisfaction rating, which means only about 5% of those who buy full-time filmmaker ask for a refund. And most of them only ask because they didn't manage their finances well that month and are trying to scramble to get some money back. Rarely does anyone refund because they didn't find value in the course. So again, we're super confident in the course. It includes all the mini courses about video production, but it doesn't include my new course, Course Creator Pro. But if you'd like to learn more about that, you can visit CourseCreatorPro.com. And just FYI, all full-time filmmakers get 50% off the Course Creator Pro course as well. So another great discount opportunity. Another question I get asked a lot is, how long do you have to complete the course? How many times can you go back and rewatch it? Again, it's one upfront payment. It's a lifetime membership, which means you can access all the current and all future content for life. It will never expire. You can watch it as many times as you want at your own pace and go back and rewatch. Another question I get a lot is, if I don't use a Canon camera, will this course still apply? Yes, many of our members shoot on Sony, Panasonic, Nikon, Blackmagic, all kinds of camera brands. It doesn't matter what camera you use, the course still applies. And probably the largest number of questions I get asked is about what gear I use. So if you guys want an in-depth look at what gear I use, visit kit.com/Patra Uolbek. I have a full list of all the gear that I've ever used, all that I own, and what I recommend. So check it out if you have any gear questions. And last question I get asked a lot is, if you join the course and you have a ton of questions, can you ask me those questions? Absolutely. Any question you have my personal email address that you can send me questions. I'm always available. We'll always reply within 24 hours. And to me, that's what separates this program from so many other educational options out there, is having personal access to practicing professionals who can help you overcome your stumbling blocks and shorten your learning curve. And speaking of questions, hopefully I've answered most of yours in this training. If you still have lingering questions, shoot me an email. Again, support@fulltimefilmmaker.com. Also, you can follow me on Instagram @fulltimefilmmaker and on YouTube @Patrica Uolbeka to keep up to date on what's going on with full-time filmmaker and with my filmmaking career. But last thing, guys, I just want to wish all of you the best of luck in your filmmaking endeavors. Be confident, invest in yourself, master the skills that I've taught you today. Go out and market yourself, build relationships, build portfolios, add value first, and I promise you'll find success. But that's it for the free 1-hour training. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you got some good value. And if you have any further questions for me, please let me know.